calmer things to come. That said, Trump's continued insistence on the idea of this as a revenue generator, continuing to tell American citizens that this is something that is going to enrich them when in fact it is demonstrably clear that they are the ones who are going to have to pay the price for this. Peter cited that example of up to 75 cents a liter on gasoline. He continues to hold steadfast to these ideas, to be fair, that have been motivating him for years, but which would lead to a very detrimental situation for people on both sides of the border.
So, Catherine, would you expect negotiations to begin almost immediately at looking at the USMCA and asking for carve-outs? Is that what happens next?
Well, and in fact, those conversations have already been underway in many ways. I mean, Dominic LeBlanc earlier talking about the conversations that were happening at Mar-a-Lago with President for Canada because of the billions of dollars that have been invested in creating both electric vehicles and electric vehicle batteries here in this country.
Thank you so much, Catherine Cullen in Ottawa, the host of CBC Radio's The House. So, Pia, a lot that we heard today we had expected, but I think it's safe to say when it comes to Donald Trump's presidency, people are right to expect the unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Lots ahead. These are first steps on the first day in office. Some he will be able to do, perhaps quite quickly. Some will take the support from the Congress, the House, and the Senate, and some will come up against legal challenges. But what we're looking for in the next weeks or so is for us Canadians about those economic threats he has been making for some time against our country, the tariffs, and how we as Canadians and our Canadian federal government, along with the provinces, respond to that.
That's right. And all of that is happening, of course, with some political uncertainty in this country, with one prime minister on his way out. And it's unclear who will come in to replace Justin Trudeau. And they may not have the exact same approach. So lots of political flux ahead when it comes to the Canada-U.S. relationship and managing the tricky politics brought on by the new president of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Yes, Susan, in Donald Trump's time, when we talk in Donald Trump time, it seems that time is sort of warped. He tries to move quickly. Sometimes the things don't take, but in terms of announcements, we'll have to wait to see what further ones Donald Trump makes. Today, he is going to sign some executive orders on the southern border. Thank you, Susan. Inauguration Day is always a special day for Americans, but also for us here at CBC Radio. Important day in our southern neighbor. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pia. Good to work with you.
You've been listening to a CBC Radio special on this historic day in the United States as Donald Trump is inaugurated as the 47th president. Stay tuned to CBC Radio, television, and cbcnews.ca for all the latest developments. Our thanks to Catherine Cullen, producers Ian Kalushner, Emma Godmere, and our technical team, Jennifer Rowley, Aronde Williams, and Chris Jackson. On behalf of my colleague Susan Bonner, I'm Pia Chattopadhyay. Thank you. We now return you.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at minus 30 with sunny skies and an extreme cold warning in downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. We begin in Washington, D.C.
And will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
As you've been hearing, Donald Trump is once again President of the United States. Trump took the oath of office just after midday in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. The ceremony was forced inside due to cold weather. In his speech, Trump said his presidency marks the beginning of the golden age of America.
We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
Trump is the second man to serve as president for 2 non-consecutive terms, the other being Grover Cleveland. late in the 19th century. Joe Biden, meanwhile, used his final hours as president to issue a number of high-profile pardons. They include Dr. Anthony Fauci, General Mark Milley, and members of the House committee that investigated the January 6th insurrection. Biden also pardoned 5 members of his own family. He says he wants to prevent them from being targeted by, quote, baseless and politically motivated investigations. Biden also commuted the sentence of Native American activist Leonard Peltier. Peltier served nearly 5 decades in federal prison for the killings of 2 FBI agents in 1975. And on the home front, even amid today's reports that the Trump administration isn't planning any immediate trade action against Canada, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has no intention of standing down, he says.
And I've sent a direction to the LCBO, these tariffs come, to clear off every bit of U.S. alcohol off the shelves. Let's start promoting more Ontario-made wines and the vodkas and spirits.
Ford says U.S. states like Kentucky, which makes bourbon, will feel the effect of being kept out of Ontario. In other news, brutal cold today has left hundreds of vehicles frozen. CAA Manitoba says it's had 3 times the typical volume of calls for help today. So far, 985 calls for service. CAA says wait times is just over an hour. Priority is being given to drivers in unsafe conditions. As well, CAA says battery replacement is not being offered in Winnipeg today, only battery boosts. Canada isn't the only country nervously watching the arrival of the new Trump administration. Ukraine also has concerns. What with Trump's plan for U.S. support for the Ukrainian war effort still far from clear. Briar Stewart explains. She's in Kyiv. She is in Kyiv.
Trump has never laid out a vision for peace in Ukraine and has just repeatedly made seemingly unrealistic claims about ending the conflict in a day. The U.S. is Ukraine's biggest military backer. Trump has criticized that and has even called Volodymyr Zelensky the world's greatest salesman for being able to secure tens of billions of dollars in U.S. military aid.
I think that he will try to put an end to the war, but I don't think that he has enough leverage to find compromises which would be acceptable to both parties.
Mykola Kapitonenko is an associate professor in international relations at the National University in Kyiv.
Trump may end up continuing Biden's strategy by providing Ukraine with limited amounts of assistance in exchange.
Trump's special envoy is expected to visit Kyiv in the coming weeks, and Trump says he'll soon be setting up a meeting with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Kyiv.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, trucks laden with humanitarian aid are rolling into Gaza on the second day of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Meanwhile, UN Chief Antonio Guterres says more than 630 vehicles entered the territory yesterday. Half of them were destined for northern Gaza, threatened with famine. The ceasefire deal requires 600 truckloads of aid to be allowed into Gaza daily for the first 6 weeks. And there's new evidence the class of drugs, which includes Ozempic, may have health benefits that go far beyond weight loss. Mike Crawley has the story.
It's the largest study of its kind to date into the effects of Ozempic-type drugs, known as GLP-1s. It looks at more than 250,000 people in the U.S. taking these medications for diabetes and finds, compared with a control group, a reduced risk for more than 40 other medical conditions. Among the strongest links, reductions in substance abuse.
Very, very consistent.
Dr. Ziad Al-Ali of Washington University in St. Louis is the lead author of the study, published in the journal Nature Medicine.
GLP-1 suppress appetite by working not only on the stomach, but also on areas in the brain that are involved in impulse control.
The study also suggests a 12% reduction in cases of Alzheimer's disease. The authors stress the findings are for now just observational, and far more research is needed before these drugs would be prescribed for any other conditions. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
In Winnipeg today, sunny and very cold, temperatures around minus 28. Brandon, extreme cold, a high of minus 27 and mainly sunny. Dauphin, a high of minus 25 with sunny skies. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Magandang hapon. Good afternoon, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Hello as well to the folks watching us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. As you've been hearing, Donald Trump is now the U.S. president, sworn in for his second term. And now people all across the country, in North America and in Mexico as well, folks are bracing for what could be a very significant impact of possible tariffs. We're going to hear from Manitoba pork producers about how Manitoba industries are preparing for this. And we're also opening our phone lines to folks listening to hear from you about how you're feeling about Donald Trump and his inauguration today. That's coming up in our next half hour of the program. You are listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. His first message during U.S. President Donald Trump's inauguration speech is that he will take an America First approach, that, quote, America's decline is over, unquote. He also repeated one of his biggest threats before today again. Take a listen.
I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources.
An incoming administration official said the new president will issue a broad trade memo later today, but will stop short of imposing new tariffs. The Manitoba Bureau of Statistics says this province exported $15.5 billion worth of goods and services to the U.S. in 2023. Almost 1,800 Manitoba companies export to the U.S., including pork producers. The province exported $439 million worth of pork and live pits to the U.S. in 2023, making the U.S. Manitoba pork's largest export market. Cam Dahl speaks for Manitoba pork producers and joins us on the line now. Hi, Cam.
It's good to be with you, Faith.
You heard Donald Trump there on the potential imposing of tariffs, the way that he characterized it there. As you heard him say that and as you watched him, what comes to mind for you?
Well, the U.S. is a critically important market for us. Manitoba exports 90% of the pork that we produce, we raise about 8 million pigs a year, and 90% of those are exported either live into the U.S. to be raised in the United States or as pork products. And as you mentioned, the U.S. is our number one market, and so this is something that we're paying really close attention to and watching closely. I was relieved, I think is the right word, to hear that there wouldn't be tariffs coming immediately, but rather the cabinet secretaries will be charged with looking at the trade flows between Canada and the United States, and that's important because Manitoba pork and Manitoba pigs make American jobs, and producers and consumers on both sides of the border benefit from our trade. Producers on both sides of the border make a little bit more money because there aren't impediments to trade, and consumers also are able to buy a high-quality product at a lower price because there aren't impediments to trade. So I believe that will be something that's clear when we go through and have a comprehensive look at our trading relationship.
Rhetoric is one thing, right? And when you heard the way that it's been framed by the U.S. administration officials, does that give you, I don't know if hope is the right word, but does it disarm that worry that broad-ranging tariffs without consideration might be a thing?
Well, I don't think we can be complacent, and I don't think anybody in the province can be complacent. The U.S. is a critically important customer, and industry and government, we need to work together to help ensure that doesn't happen, and that means we need to be reaching out to our partners in the U.S. we need to be working with them hand in hand to be able to show the value of our trading relationship.
And I wonder, when you have those sorts of relationships with American partners, I mean, what do you make of what the messaging is behind closed doors with partners compared to what you're hearing and what you're seeing with how U.S. President Donald Trump is framing it?
Well, in fact, we're going down this week to visit one of our key markets in Iowa, and to talk with state government leaders there as well as the industry in Iowa to exactly have those kinds of conversations. I think at this point, Faith, I don't know that there's a lot of certainty, and that's part of what we need to work to resolve is, again, working in partnership with our customers in the United States to ensure that the benefits of trade, both to farmers and processors in the U.S. as well as to consumers, is understood.
Are you hearing, or what are you hearing from pork producers? Because we heard this on the news at 12 o'clock, that the Ontario Premier has already looked at potential measures should tariffs come into play, i.e. removing all American alcoholic beverages from the LCBOs in Ontario. Are those sorts of conversations happening as well with your members? Are those the kind of things they're thinking about as well?
Well, at this point, our focus is going to be on trying to ensure that the benefits of trade to American consumers and American jobs is understood, and that we don't get to that point. So that is still our primary focus at this time. But those are conversations that if the worst case scenario happens is something that will need to have to occur. But again, it's not something that just one sector of the economy can go alone. This has to be a broad Manitoba approach, and in fact, again, an approach that is consistent across the country. So we need to be united on this across industry and across governments.
Cam, thanks very much for making time today. I'm sure we'll talk again soon, and talk to you especially after your trip down south.
Thank you very much.
Cam Dahl is a spokesperson for Manitoba pork producers. Just before the inauguration today, the CBC's Adrienne Arsenault spoke with Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc about what the federal government will do should tariffs come into play. Let's take a listen now.
Minister, welcome.
Heart is pounding. This is very hard to do. We both know it's not an easy task.
It sounds like we're having just some tech issues with this. We'll hear from the Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc in a few moments here. He was speaking with the CBC's Adrienne Arsenault. Let's take a listen now. All right. We are going to continue this conversation about Donald Trump's inaugural address, some of the things that he said. We're opening our phone lines in our next half hour of the program to hear from you about how you feel about the Donald Trump becoming the next U.S. president for his second term, or is now the U.S. president for his second term. We'll hear as well from a columnist with MSNBC and a regular contributor to the CBC, Paul Waldman, to take us through some of the things that Donald Trump had to say.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
"16 minutes after 12 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. We have extreme cold warnings in effect for many parts of the listening region. For Winnipeg, we are expecting mainly sunny conditions today with a high of minus 27 degrees, but because of that wind chill, expect it to feel close to minus 43. So that means frostbite in minutes. Similar forecast for Brandon today, mainly sunny, high of minus 27. But with the wind chill, it'll feel like near minus 46. Again, frostbite in minutes, an extreme cold warning in effect there. For Dauphin today, also, essentially there's an extreme cold warning for much of the listening region and much of the province today, and expect frostbite in minutes. For Dauphin, mainly sunny, a high of minus 25 with a westerly wind gusting to 60. Up in Thompson, sun and cloud with a chance of light snow and a high of minus 26 degrees. But again, because of that wind, it'll feel like minus 41. Up in Churchill, periods of light snow today, northwest winds gusting to 50, high of minus 25, and a cold wind chill. It'll feel like minus 37 late this afternoon. It's mainly sunny, minus 30 at the airport in Winnipeg, minus 31 with sunny conditions in Brandon. In Dauphin this hour, hazy, minus 29 as well at the airport in Thompson. In Churchill this hour, light snow and blowing snow, minus 26 degrees. And for all of those places that I mentioned, because of that wind, it feels like between minus 36 and minus 44. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. I'm Faith Fundal. May McKillop on the controls. Travis Peterson, our CBC Manitoba streaming producer, and Sierra Sanders is our studio director. If you're walking through a snowy field or a beautiful park this time of year, it may be tempting to take your dog off the leash for a while, but you may want to think twice. It is mating season for coyotes, and it could lead to a dangerous confrontation. Stan Garrett is director of the Urban Coyote Research Project at Ohio State University, joining us now. Hi, Stan. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Talk about coyotes' behavior. How different are they during mating season?
They can be a little more bold and aggressive, at least the what we call the alpha animals. Those are the mating pairs. So they're a monogamous species. So they have a paired up male and a female, and they're heading into that breeding season. They only mate once a year, and so they're pretty defensive, and they can be kind of aggressive toward other dog-like animals.
So what might a defensive and bold coyote look like? Is that like they look like they're about to attack kind of thing? They sound like they're about to attack?
No, actually, especially near Winnipeg, it's actually, you can start off by simply the fact that you're seeing a coyote during the day in your presence. That's already kind of a bold statement for a lot of them. And in many cases, it doesn't get past that as long as the dog is on a leash. But if the dog is off leash, then often they'll chase the coyotes, or the coyotes may chase the dog. So it could be simply being seen closer to people or out in the daytime where people are active when they are normally not doing that.
So keeping your dog on a leash is the most obvious thing. Are there other things that dog owners should consider or think about?
Sure. If they have property, so for example, their backyard backs to a green space that coyotes are using back there, you may want to keep an eye on the dog, especially if you let it out at night. So having some motion-sensitive lights, or at least just keeping an eye on the dog if you do happen to leave it out, let it out, and then letting it back in as quickly as possible. That can help quite a bit.
So if you see a coyote while you're out walking your dog, so that's sort of the first sign that folks should be concerned. What about if a coyote starts to be aggressive with you? What is the best way to react?
The best way to react is if you have a small dog, I would pick the dog up and hold it, and then back away. So often when the coyotes are acting aggressive, they're standing their ground. They'll bark. They're very vocal, so they'll bark and not retreat. So when they're doing that, I would either take the dog on the leash and tighten the leash and walk back away from the animal, or pick up the dog and back away, trying not to turn your back and run.
So it's more likely during this time of year that a coyote attacks a dog, but it's not really that common of a thing. How concerned would you say should people be about their safety and the safety of their pets when it comes to coyotes?
I don't think it's something they should necessarily change too much their behavior. I don't think it's something to worry about day to day. It's just something to be aware of. So again, there's just some small, preventative things such as the leash and that type of thing. Also, if you do see a coyote and you're walking, they may be looking at you. That's an opportunity to shout, to wave your hands, and make them run away. And they should do that if they're acting normal.
Stan, thanks for the time today. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. Take good care.
Sure, thank you.
Stan Garrett is director of the Urban Coyote Research Project at Ohio State University.
CBC Music Live. Head into the big venues, intimate concert halls, and small stages. Celebrate live music the way it was meant to be. Share in an unmistakable energy of being shoulder to shoulder with music fans and face to face with some of Canada's best musicians.
It's such an honor and a pleasure to play here.
CBC Music Live, brand new season. And catch past episodes right now on CBC Jam.
22 minutes after 12 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. And of course, on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Hello, thanks for joining us today. The first ever Thompson Polar Plunge took place at Paint Lake Provincial Park this weekend. Temperatures in northern Manitoba were in the mid-30s, but it didn't stop some pretty brave people from diving right in. The CBC's Sanuda Ranawake has more.
While a bundled-up crowd gather around a square hole in the ice, one by one, 30 brave souls jump in. Adele Guthier is with Special Olympics Manitoba.
You're in the water for less than a minute. You jump in and you're scurrying out as fast as you can. There are a number of precautions that we share with each plunger before they go in.
Like, expect to temporarily lose your breath and get to the warming tent as soon as possible. There is an RCMP officer on standby in the water. Sergeant David Michaud also removed his ice rescue suit to take the plunge.
Pretty invigorating when you jump in the water and jump out, and it's pretty crazy how cold it is, but then as soon as you dry off, I was pretty warm and ready to go again.
It was Jemiah Hurt's first time. She's born and raised in the area and doesn't mind the cold.
I woke up this morning, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to do this. But on the drive here, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm excited to do this. So
those who took part had all fundraised for weeks. The region has about 35 Special Olympics athletes and 12 coaches and volunteers.
I participated in alpine skiing, cross-country skiing, athletics, 5-pin bowling. Those weekly opportunities lead to competitions, which lead to provincial games, which leads to nationals, and eventually maybe even world games.
Trent Laycock and his team are ready for the next one.
It was cold, but doable. It's only minus 40, so not too bad.
In total, the group raised about $8,000 and rang in a chilly new tradition. Sanuda Ranawake, CBC News, near Thompson, Manitoba.
Coming up to 25 minutes after 12 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. Thanks very much for joining us here on Radio Noon. It's an interesting year for Bob Dylan. The award-winning biopic A Complete Unknown is still in theaters, starring Timothée Chalamet. And it starts 50 years since the world first heard the album many critics consider to be his best. Blood on the Tracks was released on this day in 1975, Dylan's 15th studio album, and it started off with a mixed reception amongst music critics. But over time, it's come to be known as one of the greatest albums in music history, featuring such classics as Tangled Up in Blue, Shelter from the Storm, and this one. Here's You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go.
I've seen love go by my door. It's never been this close before. Never been so easy or so slow. I've been shooting in the dark too long. When something's not right, it's wrong. You're gonna make me lonesome when you go. Dragging clouds so high above, I've only known careless love. It always has hit me from below. But this time round it's more correct, right on on target, so direct. You're gonna make me lonesome when you go. Purple clover, queen and lace, crimson hair across your face. You can make me cry if you don't know. Can't remember what I was thinking of. You might be spoiling me too much, love. You're gonna make me lonesome when you go. Flowers on the hillside blooming crazy. Crickets talking back and forth in rhyme. Blue river running slow and lazy. I could stay with you forever and never realize the time. Situations have ended sad, relationships have all been bad. Mine have been like Verlaine's and Rambo. But there's no way I can compare all them scenes to this affair. You're gonna make me lonesome when you go. You're gonna make me wonder what I'm doing, staying far behind without you. You're gonna make me wonder what I'm saying. You're gonna make me give myself a good talking to. I look for you in old Honolulu, San Francisco, or Ashtabula. You're gonna have to leave me now, I know. But I see you in the sky above, in the tall grass and the ones I love. You're gonna make me lonesome when you go.
That's Bob Dylan with You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go. It's from the album Blood on the Tracks, released on this day 50 years ago in 1975.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight, every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1. On demand on the CBC Listen app and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Paul Havershrud, host of The Cost of Living, a national business show that looks at everything the world of money touches, which, admittedly, is a lot of stuff.
The Cost of Living. Go beyond the facts and figures and discover the compelling business stories that affect the day-to-day lives of Canadians right across the country. Economics, business, and you. The Cost of Living with host Paul Havershrud. Available now on CBC Listen.
29 minutes after 12 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. It is Inauguration Day in the United States. Donald Trump, now the 47th American president. About an hour and a half or so ago, he recited the oath of office. We're opening our phone lines to ask you, our listeners, what you make of what President Donald Trump said during his inauguration speech. What stood out for you? You can call us, call our live line, 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893. You can also text our number here, 204-588-7355. What did you hear from what he said that stands out for you? Has it changed the way you see our neighbors down south? Some folks have talked about potentially not visiting. I would love to hear from you. 204-780-0893. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at minus 30 with sunny skies and an extreme cold warning in downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. Yes, in case you missed it, Donald Trump has completed a remarkable return to power.
And will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Today, Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. He used his speech today to outline the priorities of his administration.
First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
Trump also declared a national energy emergency and promised to improve domestic energy supply. He pledged to withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, to take back the Panama Canal for America, and also said the U.S. government would officially recognize only two genders, male and female. And Faith will have more on this in the next half hour of the show. Meanwhile, outgoing President Joe Biden has pardoned several family members, as well as the people who investigated the attack on the Capitol 4 years ago. It's an unprecedented move to protect them against possible retaliation by Trump. Lisa Shing reports.
With just minutes left in his presidency, Joe Biden issued preemptive pardons to 5 close family members, including his younger brother James, saying they've been subject to unrelenting attacks and threats. That's in addition to the pardons issued to retired General Mark Milley, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Liz Cheney, and members of Congress who investigated the January 6th attack on the Capitol. In a statement, Biden said the pardons should not be mistaken as an acknowledgement they engaged in wrongdoing or as an admission of guilt. While it's customary for an outgoing president to grant clemency at the end of their term, they're usually offered to Americans convicted of crimes, not those who haven't yet been investigated. Biden also came under criticism for pardoning his son in December. Hunter Biden was facing possible jail time for gun and tax convictions. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
And on the home front, in other news, brutal cold has left hundreds of vehicles frozen. CAA Manitoba says it's had 3 times the typical volume of calls for help today. So far, there have been 985 calls for service. CAA says wait times right now is just over an hour. Priority is being given to drivers in unsafe conditions. As well, CAA battery replacement is not being offered in Winnipeg today, only battery boosts. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg.
We're coming up to 33 minutes after 12 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM. Okay, looks like my iPad has started to play here.
Oh, if I had a nickel.
The iPad thought I was talking to it. Thanks, Matt.
Because you're watching the news.
I'm watching the news.
Back soon.
Matt Humphrey from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. At 33 minutes after 12 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, we're going to continue our chat about Donald Trump being sworn in for his second term as U.S. president, now the 47th American president. We're opening our phone lines to you folks as well, listening. 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893. Your thoughts of what you heard so far about his priorities, and if you have taken anything from it. You can also text us 204-588-7355. We'll also have Paul Waldman, columnist for MSNBC and a regular contributor to CBC, to help take us through what happens next. First, though, Riley Lachuk has been waiting patiently to talk about the very cold, but it's cold out there, isn't it?
It is very cold. We are looking at a couple of very cold days ahead here in Manitoba before we start to turn the page back toward more seasonal conditions. A little bit more unsettled weather comes with that, though. I'll get into it. So temperatures right now, minus 30 in Winnipeg, Gimli, Steinbach, minus 31 in both Sprague and Victoria Beach. Kenora at minus 32 right now. Brandon's minus 31. Thompson's at minus 28. You get the picture. It's cold out there.
It's
cold. Wind chill factored in, minus 45 in Swan River right now, minus 44 in Dauphin, minus 43 in Winnipeg. This is frostbite on exposed skin in minutes in some cases. Once you get down into those values of minus 45 and lower, that's when we start to get that real extreme risk of frostbite, an extreme risk if you don't cover up and bundle up properly as you're heading out. So we are looking at an extreme cold warning still in place for much of the province. Thompson, Shamattawa, Lynn Lake, and south under that extreme cold warning. Doesn't mean it's not cold in places like Churchill, for example. Just doesn't meet that warning criteria that far north. But we are looking at this hanging around thanks to an area of high pressure that has cleared us out. A little bit of stray cloud hanging around, but by and large, mostly sunny skies for the rest of the afternoon today, keeping us cold. Cloud does start to build in as we get into Tuesday, and that signals a shift in our pattern here as we get into the day on Tuesday. So a cold night tonight, and then a change as we head into the day on Tuesday, with a good chance we could see a few flurries riding along a weak area of low pressure that's making its way from northern Alberta through central Saskatchewan, down through central and southern Manitoba. This does impact Winnipeg. It gives us a bit of snow tomorrow, really periods of light snow through the afternoon tomorrow to the tune of maybe 2 to 3 centimeters. Very quick moving. By the evening hours, we're back into a mainly cloudy sky, and we start to clear out a bit as we head into Thursday, Friday. really accumulation, I said about 2 to 3 centimeters in Winnipeg, maybe up to 5 for places like Swan River, the Pas, Flin Flon, but really looking at pretty minor accumulation as we get into the midweek here. Today's temperatures, minus 28 for a high in Winnipeg, minus 27 in Brandon, minus 26 in Thompson. Coldest daytime temperature I think that we've seen in probably quite some time here in southern Manitoba. 10 degrees warmer tomorrow, though, minus 18. Slowly turning ourselves back toward more seasonal conditions here. South winds 20 gusting to 40. Minus 16 for Wednesday, minus 14 for Thursday, and then minus single digits to wrap the week up and into the weekend. So there is a little bit of relief coming if you're not a fan of these really cold extreme temperatures.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll talk to you soon. Stay warm.
Yeah, you too.
That's Riley Laychuck, our CBC Manitoba weather specialist, and he'll be back later on CBC Radio on and Up to Speed. And of course, if you want to hear his forecast, you can visit our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. I'm Faith Fundal here on Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. As you've been hearing, it is Inauguration Day in the United States. Donald Trump, now the 47th American president. Just about an hour and a half ago, he recited the oath of office.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Now, today has been the most high-profile part of the transition of power between government leaders in the U.S. Many ears and eyes listened and watched as Donald Trump gave his inaugural address. Here's part of it.
America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump during his inauguration address. We are opening our phone lines. I know some folks are already waiting. Let us know. Call us 204-780-0893 what you make of what you've heard so far with Donald Trump's inauguration speech. How all of this is landing for you. 204-780-0893. And of course, you can text us 204-588-7355. Paul Waldman is a columnist for MSNBC and a regular contributor to CBC, also waiting patiently. Hi, Paul. Welcome to the program.
Hi there.
What stood out for you? You've heard his speech. You've seen him speak as well. What's stood out to you so far?
Well, I was on CBC this morning and got asked what I thought the speech was going to be like. And I said it's probably going to be a lot like his American Carnage speech from 4 years ago, because that's sort of long been his theme, is that when he's not in power, everything is terrible. And once he takes power, everything will be great. And that's pretty much what it was. But I was also struck by the fact that there were a few moments at the beginning and the end where it tried to sort of achieve some, soaring rhetoric. But you could tell that Trump is really bored with that stuff. He's much more animated when he talks in terms that are kind of like a campaign speech, when he's just complaining about how things are going and saying everything is going to be great, and that he's kind of getting into some of the specifics. And so it really had the flavor of a campaign speech. Normally for these kind of events, we think of, that the speech writers are really going to kind of flex their muscles and try to achieve something that will be spoken about for decades to come. John F. Kennedy saying, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country, that kind of thing. But there was really none of that. It was very sort of prosaic. But I guess that's who Trump is. He doesn't really go in for that stuff.
He signed or intends to sign a number of executive orders today. We'll hear a bit of what he intends to do, but we're going to open our phone lines, Paul. We have John on the line now joining us. John, what do you think of what you've heard so far from U.S. President Donald Trump?
Hey, thanks, Faith. I think I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but he's not my president. He's he'll be somewhere on the spectrum of most world leaders. He'll do some things that don't fly so well, and he'll probably do some things that are good for the States and maybe for some other countries. Regarding Canada becoming part of the U.S., it's going to be an expensive proposition. And probably the only way that will fly is if he manages to get Mexico to pay for it. And regarding taking over Greenland and the Panama Canal, that'll require peace treaties. So he should send one of his kids down there to do the peace treaties. But the long and the short, aside from sarcasm, is he's predictable enough to know that there will be some chaos with the people who he has in his following there in the White House, and there's going to be a lot of chaos and some things will happen. But he's an unpredictable guy.
Thanks very much for the phone call, John. Paul Waldman is a contributor for CBC and a columnist for MSNBC. Outside of the sarcasm that John said there, Paul, should we take his threats seriously?
Well, this is always the challenge with Trump because he likes to kind of throw out a whole bunch of stuff, some of which he's serious about, some of which he doesn't even know whether he's serious about. I think that he hasn't really decided. He's like a lot of people have compared him to a comedian who goes around to small clubs and tries out jokes and see what lands. Well, what gets the crowd excited? And then he decides if he's going to keep it or not. And I think he does that with policy proposals too. Does he really want to take back Greenland, take back the Panama Canal? I was surprised to see the Panama Canal stuff in this speech because it was an idea that he threw out there. And it's really not feasible at all. I mean, are we going to invade Panama? That just seems preposterous. But he put it in there too. So I don't know what he intends to do with regard to that. Something like, Canada should be the 51st state. Obviously, it's kind of a troll. He says it because he knows it's going to get people upset. And then he'll be able to, kind of punch down at them. And it's a way of sowing that kind of conflict. He always thinks that conflict and controversy are what benefit him politically. So sometimes you can tell something is obviously unserious about saying Canada should be the 51st state. But some things like the Panama Canal, the more he says it, the more serious you think he might be. And then you have to deal with whether or not it might actually happen, or he might at least try. But it can be difficult because, he says so many different things. And when you're in certain kinds of positions, sometimes you have to take it seriously, even if it doesn't sound serious. And I think that's the way a lot of people in Canada feel about his tariff threats. Like when he first said, we're going to put a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, the first response is, that's insane. You're going to start a trade war that's going to drive up inflation in both countries. Why would any sane person do that? But then the more he says it, suddenly, the Canadian government and Canadian people have to start taking it seriously because it might actually happen. So it's always a quandary with Trump.
We're taking phone calls, of course, about Donald Trump and his inauguration. 204-780-0893. Mark is also on the line to talk about the tariffs. Mark, what do you make of those threats?
I don't see it as a threat. I see it, thanks for having me. I see it as a two-way, because he said, secure the border, Canada, or I'll put the put the tariffs on.
And so it's for you, it's not a sort of a if this then or a black or white issue. There's some nuance there for you in terms of what the opportunity is for Canada.
Yes, because I believe a lot of Canadians said we should secure our border as well.
Thanks very much for the phone call, Mark. Paul Waldman, MSNBC columnist and CBC contributor. What do you make of what Mark had to say there? Is that what Canada has decided to do?
Well, after Trump started talking about this, the Canadian government said that yes, we're going to have some initiatives that around the border, but the whatever border problems the United States has, it's not from our northern border, your southern border, it's with Mexico. It's not as though there is a flood of undocumented immigrants coming south from Canada into the U.S. Nor is there the other problem is drug smuggling, especially fentanyl. And there is some fentanyl production that happens in Canada, and the Canadian government is trying to deal with that. but most of it comes up from Mexico. And so it's not as though Trump said, if you do these 3 specific things, then we won't put the tariffs on. It was all kind of vague. And so Canada can certainly say, okay, we've taken these steps to help secure the border we have with the U.S., and we're working with the American Border Patrol, and everything is going great. Is that going to assuage Trump? I don't think anybody knows. And this is part of the problem, especially with the tariffs, is that there's only a couple of policy issues that he really cares deeply about. One of them is trade, the other is immigration. And he puts out this idea and for 25% tariffs, and even a lot of his own economic advisors think that it's a bad idea. And so they come out and they try to sort of moderate it and say, well, maybe we'll just put tariffs on certain industries, or maybe it'll phase in some way. And then Trump will come out the next day and say, no, I meant what I said. So we don't know actually what is going to happen, because any economist of any political stripe will tell you that those kind of dramatic tariffs with the United States' biggest trading partner would be a really, really bad idea. And so if that's the advice that he's going to be getting, but yet he has this kind of emotional desire to put tariffs on to show how strong and tough he is, and and even in this speech we saw today too, that he talked about how foreign governments are going to be having tariffs, and it brings in so much money. And of course that's not how tariffs work. Importers pay tariffs. If you think just about, for instance, the automobile industry around Michigan and Ontario, by the time a car gets finished, some part of it of the car has probably passed back and forth over that border a half dozen times. And every time it's going to be paying 25% tariffs, that's going to raise the cost of that car really significantly. And that's not something that Trump wants, because I think he's smart enough to realize that the main reason that he won this election was the fact that we had inflation for a while. So we really don't know. Where is this going to end up? What is the policy actually going to look like? Maybe he'll put on tariffs for a little while and then take them off. There's a bunch of possibilities, but there really isn't a lot of clarity coming from the new White House.
Paul Waldman joining us here on Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1 and on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Donald Trump sworn in as for his second term as U.S. president. He also, during his inaugural address, laid out some of the broad strokes of his first day executive orders and talked about this.
This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based.
U.S. President Donald Trump during his inaugural address. Let's head to the phone lines now. Edward joining us now on the line. Edward, what do you make of what Donald Trump said today?
Well, first of all, Faith, it's a pleasure making your contact. With all the years you've been there, this is our first conversation. As to Donald Trump, I didn't listen to it except now until the noon program. And when he ended up reciting the oath, talk about eye roll. I mean, just unbelievable. Why do we take him so serious? I mean, my sense is he doesn't have the moral authority of a child, as do many of our politicians. And my sense is we should start basically organizing ourselves and making a difference, as opposed to just allowing him to set the agenda. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, as your most recent caller or guest ended up clarifying. I mean, he's all over the map. For us to go ahead and take him seriously, we're wasting our time and our ability to make a difference.
Thanks for your call, Edward. Paul Waldman, are we wasting our time? Should we take him seriously?
Well, this is the dilemma, I think, that a lot of governments face now, and maybe Canada more than almost any other, is that you don't really have much of a choice. America is your neighbor and the largest economy in the world and your biggest trading partner, and the linchpin of the NATO alliance. One of the things that he has threatened to do is pull out of NATO. We don't know if that's going to happen. That would be a really extreme step. But if he did, there's a good chance the alliance would collapse. If he goes through with the tariffs, the effect on the Canadian economy would be profound. And so you don't really have a choice. And that's what could be very frustrating about a kind of erratic, mercurial leader like that, is that you might like, as the caller said, to just not take him seriously. But if the things he's going to do are going to affect your lives, then you don't really have a choice in the matter. And it's difficult because sometimes he says things that sound perfectly reasonable and he doesn't follow up on them. And sometimes he says things that sound ridiculous and he does follow up on them. And there's no necessarily any kind of real rhyme or reason to it. A lot of it is very much based on his whims and who he's listening to. And so, if there was a guidebook where you could just look things up and say, okay, this thing that he said, I know that's not going to happen and I don't have to worry about it. That would be a lot easier. But there is no such guidebook for Trump.
What did you make of when he said, he talked about the social engineering, but specifically said that America will only recognize two genders, male and female? What did you make of that?
Yeah, well, this is, he's talking about race and about gender. And Trump has always been the candidate of white backlash. And there's an argument to be made that he could only have become president the first time after the first American black president, that there was a real kind of racial backlash to that. And that's how you got a candidate who put race and this kind of blood and soil national identity so much at the center of his campaign, and always has. And in recent days, the last couple of years, I think really since, in the summer of 2020, we had the George Floyd murder, and then this real kind of racial reckoning about the way police treat people, and about kind of the opportunities that people of different races have, and that kind of took over the country for a little while, and then there was a real backlash to it, where conservatives especially were trying to kind of root out any sort of, not just racial preferences or racial quotas or anything like that, which are very rare and in most cases illegal, but in some cases, any kind of acknowledgement of continuing racism or structural racism. There are now many states in the United States where it is against the law to teach about structural racism in schools. So you had this real backlash that he is continuing, and now a lot of it is focused on what they call DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the kind of catchphrase that's used to apply to certain kind of programs that you find in a variety of institutions, whether it's colleges or corporations. And so that backlash is kind of getting more intense and more concrete. And so, you have, for instance, Trump's nominee to be the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who has written about how he thinks that officers who have ever done anything to promote racial inclusion in the military, which has been a great success story. It's one of the most inclusive and diverse institutions in American society, that those people ought to be purged. And that's something that I think that we're probably going to see is a firing of a lot of flag officers, generals, and admirals who have been involved in efforts to diversify the military. And then you have the gender issue, which, frankly, until recently, Trump did not care about. Somebody asked him a couple of years ago, what bathroom do you think Caitlyn Jenner should use? And he said, whatever bathroom she wants to use. Like, he doesn't care. But then this past year, Republicans realized that they could make this into a potent political issue, and they could create a backlash. And the polls really shifted as Republicans put so much attention on just billions of dollars spent on ads trying to make people afraid of transgender people. And so now Trump has incorporated that right into the kind of central message that he gives, not, I think, because he really cares deeply about it, but because he realized it's really potent for his base, for them to tell them that, society is changing and this is something you should be afraid of, and we can hit back on this, and we can, ban people from using bathrooms that match their gender identity, or we can go as far as this is what he says he's going to do with an executive order, to essentially declare that transgender people do not exist, and that the government is not going to acknowledge them in any way.
Paul Waldman is a columnist for MSNBC. We're hearing from him, of course. I want to just go back to the phone lines, Paul. Chris also joining us now to talk more about what stood out during Donald Trump's inauguration speech and during the day today. Chris, welcome to the program. Hello. And I need to press the button. Here we go. I think I pressed the button. Hi, Chris.
Hi. I think the thing that is very important to be taken care of really is how is the world going to respond to the most immediate and urgent problem of this presidency. Who he's a person who doesn't have a clue when it comes to fossil fuels. His motto is drill, drill, drill. And this is, a very pressing issue. It's not only LA that's been on fire. Greece and Romania and Asian countries and Jasper and BC and Manitoba. I mean, the world's been on fire. And there's floods and islands are disappearing. It seems like a pretty urgent, pressing thing, but he hasn't any concept of the work that's been going on at COP, although, it has, you could say, been largely lip service, but he's definite about not having any part of that. And when you look at the number of people around us who don't even seem to want to put out for a carbon tax, you have to wonder if he has any awareness of what the actual most pressing danger is.
Thanks very much for your phone call, Chris.
I want to know what the rest of the world is going to do in response to this.
Paul Waldman, we just have about a minute left here. What do you make of, in his inauguration speech, what his understanding, Donald Trump's understanding of climate change is?
Yeah, he's at various times been a climate denier. And this is going to be a complicated issue in terms of how it plays out, because the Biden administration did a lot of things on climate, passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is probably the most important piece of climate legislation in American history. They've been rushing in the last few months to get as much of the money as possible from that bill out the door to clean energy projects, to climate mitigation efforts. So they have been sending out these grants as fast as they can. And you have a program where people get rebates for buying electric cars and for buying heat pumps. Trump has said that he wants to revoke all that, and he wants to reduce or eliminate the kind of emission standards that have promoted electric cars. We're already, he talks about drill, baby, drill. We're already drilling so much more than any other country ever has. But a lot of the stuff that Biden did will probably stick around and be persistent. And Trump can't undo it, but there's a lot of things that he probably can undo. And his in the relevant departments in his government, they are going to be stocked with people who either pay lip service to climate change or are outright climate deniers. So the question is, where are we going to end up in terms of climate in 4 years? But one of the things that he has said is he's going to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, as he did 8 years ago. As the caller said, you might consider the Paris Accord lip service, but it does have a lot of meaningful symbolic value.
Paul Waldman, thank you. Paul Waldman, columnist with MSNBC and a regular contributor to CBC. I'm Faith Fundal. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. Bye, Paul. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.